The idea here is really taking a look at visualizing and getting access to the data, whether it be holistic at our server level with the Nintex tenant or actually the individual process. And once we can visualize this data, then you can see that these other two pillars that you have here as far as targeting processes and improving the way people work and the way we collaborate, those kind of come out of this. So there's two parts to Nintex Hawkeye as far as the visibility goes. There's the concept of lenses. What is a Nintex lens? Basically, there's two types of lenses that you can create other lenses from. One of them is a usage lens that actually gives you the holistic view of everything going on within your Nintex implementation, as far as, you know, how many processes do we have, what state are they in, what were the common outcomes, how long did it take a lot of these to run. And then what we can do with a process lens is we can actually get the actual data from an individual process. So we'll take a look at that, and it'll make more sense as we move forward here. Let's just take a look at some usage samples here of taking some usage reports that you get from Nintex. So these are this is a far view. I'm going to go to the next screen that actually shows you some real values here. But one of the things they can do for you is kind of calculate the development costs and your return on investment based on how much Nintex you've actually rolled out, how many workflows and forms, and also give you a comparison of what it would take, what you're seeing in green, which would be Nintex versus doing development, custom development, or, you know, SharePoint development costs that you'd actually be doing with something like InfoPath or SharePoint workflows. So there's a lot of different ways that you get these metrics that come back that you can actually use them as a tangible way to justify what you're doing, or maybe even see that you're not using it correctly and you might want to think about using it in a different way. From the process side of it, it's a completely different story. Now we're getting down to a micro level and really kind of figuring out within a certain process, I want to be able to bring data up so I can see different types of metrics here. So on the left-hand side, I know it's kind of hard to see with these colors here in the green, but you can look at an expense history for this person, Luke, and see that Luke is spending most of his expenses on travel above a 10,000 K threshold here. And if you look at the second thing he's spending a lot of time on or money on is flights in here. So there's a lot of things that we can do here when you're looking at the right. This is all Power BI, which Hawkeye takes advantage of. And if you've ever played with Power BI, you know that when you click on different areas on the screen, if I were to click on a donut here on administration, it would filter all the other controls. And I'm going to show you how to do that today. Here's another example for the expense report here with a process lens. So looking at the expense amount by category, expense by department, expense amount by location, so you can see that money's being spent in North America, in Australia. These are the two places where things are being spent. And also looking at the spending across the categories here in the upper right. So just a bunch of different ways, a bunch of different graphics that you can take advantage of. And I'm going to show you how to create a very similar report from scratch for doing something like this. So let's talk about the key Hawkeye fundamentals. The first thing you have to do within the environment is set up a data collector. The data collector is installed on your server, your SharePoint server, and then once that's done, that actually feeds data into the Nintex tenant in the cloud, the Hawkeye tenant. And then what you're basically doing is you're applying what's called lenses. So what is really a lens? A lens is saying, this is the type of data I'm interested in, the focus of my data, and then what you can do is you can take third-party tools and create different visualizations from that data. So look at a lens of a way to filter whether the types of data that you're using, whether it might be something like, we said, a usage lens that's a more holistic view, from a higher level, or if we get into a process lens that's going down to actually getting data that's being captured through your actual workflow. In a little more detail here, looking at data collectors here, this will come up on your screen in a second. What I really wanted to point out here is that right now what I'm about to show you is running on SharePoint 2013. That's my environment right now. Coming soon, 2016, in Office 365. And I know some of you might look at that and go, okay, that means I can only use it on SharePoint 2013. That is true. That's how it's being rolled out right now. And within about a month to 6 weeks, they'll be rolling out the other pieces as well here. But having said that, it's really important that you probably go and play with this product, and you can just go up and get a Hawkeye trial account from us. And once you've done that, what'll happen is you can go there and play with a lot of Hawkeye features without actually connecting them to a data connector, but be very, very familiar with it. By the time we're done today, I think you're going to have a really great, good idea of some things that you might want to try, and you'll have to look and see what's most appealing to you. Once we've set up the data collector and we've gone into Hawkeye, we go into Hawkeye, we point it down at our environment to our data collector, and then we can figure out how we want to synchronize data. Hawkeye collects all the data that's being collected in the cloud, and this data is actually put into different locations, different geolocations, depending on any geopolitical issues that you might have. You can choose a location where your data is stored in the cloud, so they've got you covered as far as that goes. Since you see that everything we're doing is through the OData link, obviously Power BI can absorb that data. We can consume that in Excel, or we can use any other third-party tool that's, that can support OData. So a lot of different options there. And then through Power BI or whatever other tools you have, you can share your dashboards and put them in SharePoint and really kind of project a lot of that data so people can take advantage of it. So before I get to the demo, this is my last slide before the demo. I want to show you what's involved with collecting data from in the case of a process lens. Now, a usage lens will use your environment data to be able to pull all the information. So there's not a lot of configuration that you have to do there. But when you're dealing with a process lens, remember, is a way to be able to capture data as it's flowing through your workflow. So there's a couple things I want to point out here. There's 3 types of beacons. There's a begin, an end, and another beacon just called beacon. So let me start with begin and end. The begin and end beacon give you a way of trapping how long it takes from a starting point to an ending point. And the reason that you want this is that you can trap a metric of how long did it take from the start of the approval process to the point where we actually got approval or rejection. So this would be a key metric that you can put in a report. So as we start to look at reports that are going through, we have this manager, and we can actually say, well, how long did it take this manager to go through and approve from the time it was submitted till the time it was either approved or rejected. So you can use these start or begin and end beacons anywhere you want to. Every time that action item runs, it'll put an entry into a database so that you can correlate those later in any kind of a data modeling tool that you want to. For us, it's going to be Power BI. Now, those are the start and end. You can use multiple of these depending on different stages you might have within a workflow process. So you can use as many of these from to start and end or begin and end. The other side of it is something just called a beacon. Now, a beacon is used to collect data and store it inside a Hawkeye. So what you're doing at this point is you're just saying, at this point in the workflow, I want you to capture some information, and you as the workflow developer or designer, you go in there and you say, hey, I want to collect these variables, I want to collect this input that the user put in the form, and I want to store that for reporting on later. So you can put these beacons anywhere you want to for collecting data. So anywhere it makes sense where we might want to collect information, you have that opportunity to be able to do that. So let me go ahead and go through this demo. Let me share this with you, my screen. So the first off, what I wanted to do was show you, it'll come up on your screen in a minute, I have an issue tracker application that I created, and this issue tracker application was made as a demonstration for another customer where I added the Nintex process lens capability here. And so what you basically have here is the customers will send in some product, and the product might have some kind of default, like a faulty power supply. And when we receive that as a company, we have to put this. We want to put the status, whether it was not serviceable, whether it was resolved. We want to also look at the issue, the workflow, and see if it was completed. So the form is very simple here, where you go out, you fill out the customer name, you fill out the city, state. You go ahead and pick the different types of equipment, and then when the user submits that, we could say, well, you know, this product was dead on arrival when we received it, and that information will be stored in the list that you were seeing here, and then I'll run through the workflow. Now let's take a look at the workflow. The workflow is a very simple workflow where in the beginning, we have a beginning beacon, and we're just setting this beginning beacon. If we go in and look at the configuration, all we're doing is we're saying we're starting, the stage name is a start, the issue, and the end one, which wasn't a real good name that I used here, was we're using an ending beacon for this stage called start issue. So I can tell from the beginning to the end the time frame from the time we receive the product from the customer until we resolve the issue with the customer. Now, one of the things that I did here as well is once this has been submitted, we send the notifications to the notifier to let them know that we received it, and then the service people actually go in there and say that, okay, we resolved it, or we had to mark it as not serviceable. But one of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to collect data at this point after we've had either not serviceable or resolved. So look at this beacon here, and this is the data that I wanted to be able to collect. Now, remember, my form had a lot of this information in it, so I'm basically taking my form data, I'm taking the product, and you can create any names that you want to. You can add any name you want to, and then you can come in here, and if you're familiar with Nintex workflows, you have item properties, you have workflow constants, different common things that you could add. So basically, any value that you want to, you can stuff in here. But I chose to select the product, the defect type, the customer ID, and city name and state. You'll notice I renamed them, and inside of Hawkeye, Hawkeye will actually take the names from the left-hand side. So even though in my workflow I called it one thing, now in Hawkeye, location is considered to be city, state, and country. Issue status is status, so you can see what I'm doing there. Once we've done this and set up a beacon to collect data, every time this workflow runs, it'll actually store information inside of Hawkeye that we can use to be able to trap that data. So I would go in here, I would publish this. Next time this runs, we would actually collect all this information. So we'd be able to tell you how long it takes to run each individual process, and for each individual process that runs, I have the data being logged. Okay? So what do I do after that? It's very simple. On the left-hand side, when you install Hawkeye on your server, you're going to end up with one tab that comes up called Hawkeye, and this is where you can add your beacons, where you can drag and drop beacons, do your begin and end, or anything you need to do. But it's just basically three different levels of beacons here. If you want to trap time frame, for like I said, or if you want to catch individual data, you can do that as well. All right, so now that we've published this, how do I get the data into a report? So this is where you log into Hawkeye. This is what the screen looks like. You can see my data source on the upper right-hand side. is pointing to my tenant. So this is how Hawkeye knows how to pull the data from my local tenant. So we're in this cloud service. Here are the different lenses that I have, and we're inside my tenant here. So let me go ahead and show you how easy it is to be able to take that data that we just created. So the first thing you want to do is create a lens. The lens is going to ask you, what kind of lens do you want to create? A usage, a process. Coming soon, there's some new things they're going to be adding here, inventory and monitoring. These will be coming online very soon. What I want to do is I want to collect the data from the actual process. I don't want to look at the holistic level. We can look at that later. But I want to look at the process and pull my data that I've been pulling that out from. So now what I have to do is I'm creating a process lens. And we'll go ahead and say, we'll call this process lens for issue tracker. And what I want to do is I want to associate a workflow with that lens. And so I did a search. I have issue tracker workflow, which was a workflow I was just showing you. And when I add it, you'll see that what it does is it basically goes down, and Hawkeye is smart enough to go down and then start extracting the data. So it already knows that I have 100 rows of data because I've run that workflow multiple times over the course of the last couple months. So I'm done with that. I've actually associated my workflow with this lens. So now it becomes very easy. What do you want to do next? Now what I want to do is I want to create a dashboard. So when I create a standard dashboard down here at the bottom, this is step number 2, it will actually create a default dashboard for me that shows 3 different metrics. The process metrics for showing me everything, how many processes were executed since I installed Hawkeye, task initiated, pending task, process participation as far as who was actually the actors or initiators, publishers or participants, and also looking at how many outcomes that we have here. We had 21 that were resolved, we had 14 that were not serviceable, and then we had 1 that's pending. So you can see that this is actually getting the data from that workflow that we published with the beacon data. And we can also look at the process ROI here. I wouldn't expect this to be was just a demo, but basically showing the development cost saved in red and everything that they based on, you know, Nintex versus SharePoint Designer, or doing it as a custom dev in Visual Studio. So these are out of the box 3 pages that you get out of the box as far as a process lens goes. But how do we add our custom data? So let's go ahead and show you how to do that. What I need to do is go up here in the upper right and say dashboard actions, and then what I'm going to say is I want to download the Power BI template for the process intelligence dashboard here. So when I do that, what it's going to do is allow me to copy my data to OData to the clipboard, and then it'll bring down a template for the dashboard that you were just seeing. Now what's going to happen is you can install Power BI Desktop. It's a free download, and what we're going to do is we're going to use Power BI Desktop for actually creating this dashboard. So bear with me for a second because I've got this loading on a secondary screen. I need to let it load, and then I'll drag and drop it up so where you can see it. So let me give me 1 second here, and it'll take a second to load the data. It's actually what's going on is my Power BI Desktop is loading all the data from the model, and then once it's completed, I'll be able to show that to you. So hang with me just for a second here. Okay, so it just did it, and what I'm going to do is bring this up into where you can see it. So we're sitting here in the Power BI Desktop. We downloaded the template. The template brings down all the information. It brings down the data, it brings down the dashboard that you were just seeing. So the process metrics that you were seeing, everything that you were seeing previously in the dashboard is still there, okay? How do I get to the data that I wanted? So what we can do, and this is a tricky part where you might want to take a little bit of notes, is we want to massage our data so that it'll make it very easy to drag and drop and create a new report or a new page in this dashboard. So what you want to do is you want to go up into Edit Queries, and all our process data is sitting here on the left-hand side called Process Beacon. Now, if you take a look, there was a lot of data that's being brought across. So you remember when we were filling out the form, we wanted to collect product, issue, customer, all the different values here, issues, all the different things we want to do. On the left-hand side, what I can do is I can actually go in there and create something called a reference, and this reference will rename it and call it My Data. And the reason that we're creating a reference and renaming it is because I might want to create other reports with this process beacon data and modify it, but this gives me my own copy, like a reference to it, and allows me to massage the data any way I want to. So there's a lot of data here that I'm really not interested in, and what I want to do is I want to clean this data up, and this is the only part that gets a little more tricky with Hawkeye and dealing with Power BI. So one of the things I want to do is I want to select basically 3 columns. One of them is a unique one that's a column of the workflow instance ID. Another one is the property name and the property value. So what I can do is I can right click and say remove all other columns. So now I have all my data, but I want you to notice that all my data is sitting in columns here, and what I want to do is I want to make individual records going from left to right. So the way I do that is I actually click on property name, then I go up to transform, and I column. And what I'm interested in doing is I want to make every property name a column instead of a row here. So I'm going to change the property name, and then what you have to do is you have to set one other thing here, and this can be a little bit understanding what it's doing. We don't want it to aggregate the data. All we want to do is pivot the data so that we can get it into records where it makes more sense. So now you can see now each individual row is an individual record. Okay? So you can see there was a lot of data that has nulls in it and some errors in here. And the reason I had that is because I put in the beacons before and I kept on adding to it, and a lot of data didn't exist. So when we were doing under review or whether the beacon issue status, you can see these are null on the right hand side, and the reason for that is because they didn't exist before we started adding data. So one of the things I can do is I can actually go in here and clean up this data, and this is part of your job as working with the data, is I want to get rid of the nulls and get rid of the blanks. And then you can see here's our data set. So we had different products, we had different customers, different statuses, and now what I can do is I can go in here into the upper left and choose close and apply. Now what's happening is this is being applied here, and you'll see in the right hand side I have something called My Data. That was everything that we filtered out and all the columns that I want to take advantage of. So now that I have my data straight, now what we can do is we can go and add a custom page. And let me show you how cool this is. One of the things I'm going to do here is I'm going to mimic a report that I created before, and I'm going to go in here, and the first thing I'm going to do is here are all my different visualizations that I could take advantage of, different types of charts. So the first thing I want to do is take advantage of a geographical map here, and what I want to do is I want to take the location from my data and drag and drop that here as far as a location field right here. And now you can see that all the locations for my customers are showing up on the map. And just to take it a step farther is I can take the location and drag it onto Legend. And now what it's going to do, it'll actually color code those for me. So as we come in here and zoom in, you can see I have customers on the West Coast, and we also have a customer in Japan. Okay? So that's the first thing we've done. The next thing I want to do is I want to drag and drop, or I just click on a donut here, and I'm going to put this in the upper right, And there's a couple things I want. As far as the details go, I want to know who the customer is as far as the details go. So the first thing I want is a customer, but I also want to find out what are the issues that they're having. So the values that I want for this is down below where I'm actually putting in the values. So now what you're seeing is you're seeing my different customers and you're seeing that the issues that they sent back. So you can see that the company Plantronics sent back the most products from us. Now that could either be, and we don't know if it's an individual product issue. Maybe they're on the West Coast and there's a lot of salt in the air or something that's affecting the motherboard. We don't know. So one cool thing is I can click on the filter here and it'll zoom in and you can see that Plantronics has an office in Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona, and also in Santa Cruz, California. Nissan, if I want to click on Nissan's in Tokyo, we can also go in there and look at the location and get data. But one thing you should take away from this is everything here is synced together. If I click outside of the donut where my mouse is right now, the filter will go back to include all. Now, what I want to do next is I want to add another bar chart in the lower left. And what I want to do here to get more information is I actually want to have on the axis part of it, I want to go with a different product. So I'm going to take product and drag and drop it on the right hand side, and that'll go across the bottom. And then for the count, I want to look at the issues. So we're going to take issues on the right hand side and drag and drop it to values. Now what you're seeing is the different types of hardware and the types of issues they have. So if we take a look at this high resolution spectrometer, if I click on that on the left, I can tell you that it was Plantronics here that was having the issue with it, and you can see that the map syncs up with that as well. Or if I want to take a look at Verizon up in the upper up here, you can see that they had the ICP Neo in the lower left, and you could see that they were based out of Portland, Oregon. So everything's working there. The last thing I want to do is I want to come in here and I want to add a table chart. So the table chart's a really cool one because I can just go through here and say, well, I want to just click on what I want here. I want to have the first column, I want to be, let's see, let me delete this. Hang on, let me, that one screwed up on me. Let me just add this here. So the first thing I want to do is I want to put the customer name. And next thing I want to do is have, let's say what location they're at, what product they had, what the issue was, and how it was resolved. So you can see that maybe we need a little more room here. And let me go ahead and add that in here. So now, look how cool this is. Everything, again, is synced up through Power BI. When I click on Plantronics, notice I get everything in Plantronics here. I can see what the products were, what the issues were, and what the status was, whether they're not serviceable or whatever we had going on here. Now that I'm done with this report, I can take this report. Maybe I don't need a process ROI in the lower left-hand corner right here, so I can delete that page. I can go in here and rename this page of issue report. That's what I'm going to call this. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to publish this. So I'm taking this and I'm going to publish this. I'm going to save this and call it issue report. Now what we're doing is we're actually publishing this back up to Power BI. So we had this client tool where we're able to massage the data and also go in and create the report. Now what we're doing is we're actually publishing it back up to Power BI. And there's some pretty cool things we're going to be able to do there that I'm going to show you. So once this is done, it's going to give you the option to open it up in Power BI and see what it looks like. So give this a second. So here we go. It was a success. Now we're going into Power BI. Now with Power BI, the cool thing about this is here's the report that we just created, and everything should have the full fidelity of everything we just did. So give it a second to come up. So if we go for Tesla here, we can see all the information we want. If I want to see who has these meters here, we can see that Microsoft and USAA have these two products and some of the things that were going on there. I can go up here and I can go up to File and I can say Publish to the web. Now when I create this embed code, what's really cool about this is I can actually give a link to somebody. So I can take a link, or I can embed this inside of a web page. It can be inside of SharePoint. It can be inside of an email. It really doesn't matter how you do it, but you can also say the size you want to use there as well. So you can see that there's a lot of different things that you can do there. And if we take a look here, let me just open this up. 1 second. I'm going to open up the chat window, and I'm going to send you this link just so you can see. If you open up your chat window, you should see that I just sent you a link to this report that I just published. So if you go to your chat in the wherever your chat window is and click on that, you'll have the ability to do that. You can do it later. I'm going to leave this up for you so you can play with it later. Just let me show you some other cool things that you can do here. Here's the other pages at the lower bottom that we were looking at. So you had the process metrics, you had the process participation. Those are your default ones that you get back with the return on investment. But let me show you some other things that happen here. On the lower left-hand side, we have the issue report. This is the data set that we created. Now remember, inside of Power BI, we want to suck the data out of Hawkeye, and one of the things that we can do here is we can come in here and schedule the refresh. So one of the things that you can do when you're scheduling the refresh is you can set the frequency. You can set the frequency to be daily. If you want to go to hourly, you have to upgrade to Professional Edition of Power BI. But by default, out of the box, you can refresh on a daily basis. You can set up how you want to refresh. There's some other things that you can do as well. You can set up Cortana so that Cortana, you can ask questions against this data set and use Cortana to type in live questions around your data. You can see that the issue report that we created right here ends up showing up as far as one of your reports here, but you also have the ability to pin this to different dashboards as well. So I can come in here and say, you know what, I want to have this be in a new dashboard, and I want to call that dashboard my demo dashboard, where I can actually take multiple, I'm having trouble spelling, I can take multiple reports that I have and put them in there. So here's my demo dashboard right here. And let me show you something really cool here, because this is part of Power BI and something that as you start to push this out, maybe you not seeing in the report something that you can get the data from, or it's not making sense to you. There's something else you want to get. Now remember, everything inside your Power BI report here that you've pulled all the data from Hawkeye actually exists in the data set. So when you want to go up here and ask a question about your data set, I could say something like customers with product, let's say customer and products with firmware update issues. Look at this. Whatever I type in, it'll give me on-the-fly dynamic response here, so I can actually see that we had 3 different customers that had products that had firmware upgrade as their status, and we can verify that if we go in here and sort by issue. Hang on with 1 second here. You can see that we have those 4 customers right here. So if I don't have the data that I quite need, I can go in there and ask some dynamic questions. Sorry, I'm not thinking off the top of my feet right here as far as the great one that you could do, but you could ask for different different ways of showing stuff. If you want to be able to zoom in on a specific piece of your report, let's go ahead and take a look at this issue report. I can actually come in here and I can say, you know what, I'm interested in getting in focus mode. Focus mode will actually allow me to look at stuff, and I can always go back to the report and get more details. So this is one of the cool things about the dynamics of Power BI, is giving you this ability to be able to go in there and modify things the way you want to, or get a look and feel. But because you created this report using Power BI and Hawkeye, everything is synced together. That's something I did wrong here as far as adding a report behind this. This shouldn't be here. So just so you know, that shouldn't be there. So anyway, you're going to see a flaw in my report there when you go in there and actually take a look at it. I don't know if I can go into Designer and change that, but I'll change that and then repost this. Okay. So in a nutshell, that's all it takes to be able to do this using Hawkeye. Very simple. I think the hardest part that you were seeing there was probably when I went in here and I was working with the data. You can see, let me go ahead and remove this and publish one more time. I think one of the hardest things for a lot of people to get a handle on is going up and dealing with the query up here and massaging your data. But I think the way I showed you, by just removing the columns that you don't need and doing one pivot and then cleaning up the data you don't want to see in the report, there's a very simple way to do that. So again, going back up here to edit queries, you'll notice that when I come into my data here, everything that I did as far as applying the steps over here shows up in the right-hand side. So I removed the other columns, I pivoted the columns, and then I filtered the rows. Okay, so very, very simple thing to do. We went from the source. We removed the columns that we didn't care about. We only wanted the workflow instance ID to get a unique ID for each one of these entries. And then we pivoted, and then we filtered and got rid of all the nulls and blanks. So that's simple, and then chose to apply and close. Okay. One thing I want to point out before we wrap it up and answer Q&A, Hawkeye at the moment does not have the ability to take your dashboards and put them back up. So when we looked at the report that we had here, here's the standard report that we had. You'll notice that what we did not end up showing back up in this dashboard. This just gives you the standard process intelligence dashboard. You're not seeing that extra one that we added. That ends up being outside of the scope. What they're going to do with the next release here is you will be able to add your dashboards up here as well. So for right now, you can publish in Power BI. You can add those to a site inside of SharePoint. But again, you can take these three from the template that you download and actually use those as well. So you can have one-stop shopping for anyone that needs to be able to see that data. So let me go back here real quick, and while we're doing this, bear with me for 1 second. So some of the things I want you to take away from this is really looking at, you want to be able to get the data. So we use the collectors. We want to be able to get the information, whether it's around our holistic workflow view or whether we want individual process and pull that data out. We take that, we're actually able to get that information and put it in a situation where we can track it and get more benefit from the processes that we have and being able to do this simple type of reporting. I think if what we did, that was relatively simple. The first time you do it will probably take you an hour. The second time you do it will take you 45 minutes. I was able to create everything you're seeing there in about a half an hour. If I didn't have to talk through it, it would have been even quicker. So next, why don't we open this up for Q&A? And if you have to leave, I really appreciate your time. If there's something you need more explanation about, feel free to send me an email to alexv@netwoven, and we'll also be sending out this slide deck as well. But if you have to leave, I thank you for your time. If not, we'll open it up for questions now.
Alex, we had one question that hasn't been answered yet. Someone wanted to just understand the recommended process to get started with Hawkeye. Can you just talk through that?
Yeah, so to get started with Hawkeye, if you're using SharePoint 2013, all you got to do is go to Nintex and do a Google search for Nintex Hawkeye and sign up for a trial account. So you can get that and be able to use it. It's really that simple. They'll give you a demo account and get you up and running as quick as possible. I would even encourage you to do it if you don't have a SharePoint 2013 environment as well, because you'll be able to look at some of the samples that they have. So they have a bunch of example dashboards for usage and for different types of scenarios. Like I cut and pasted inside of the chat window for doing expense reporting and different scenarios to really kind of open you up to the capabilities and the new things you might be able to do.
And then one more, how does Hawkeye work in a hybrid environment?
So great question. When they come out with the Office 365 version, you'll be able to point to multiple environments and get a holistic view. So that's a great question, because it's not going to just be looking at my SharePoint Online environment and my on-prem environment. You'll be able to point to both, and Hawkeye is smart enough to be able to collect data from both environments and give you a holistic view of your entire rollout. So it's a really great thing. All the reports you're seeing as far as usage go, or the process lenses, they can all be modified. They're basically templates for everything. So if you find something you like in one, or maybe you want to display it a little different way, it's all available to you. And when you download the template, you have the ability to completely modify it.
All right, thank you. I think that was it. So unless anyone has anything else, we appreciate your time today. Recordings of today's webinar will be sent out to everyone who registered, and please do reach out to us to get started with Nintex and help developing Nintex solutions. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you, everyone, and please send me an email if you have any questions or something wasn't quite clear enough. Thank you very much.